Hi, everyone. My name is Ella Washington. I'm a professor of practice at Georgetown University. And I'm also the founder of Ellavate Solutions consulting firm. And so I have the unique position of having both a career in academia as well as in practice. And so I love being in spaces like this. There weren't always spaces like this where we could talk outwardly about research and practice in the same space and have the opportunity to learn from each other. So it's super excited to be here. Today, I want to talk about DEI training. And so Quinetta and Sherry have both started the conversation and mentioned DEI training. And I often get asked by C-suite leaders, what is the quick fix that we can do to improve DEI? And so, this question itself oftentimes makes me visibly squirm because the thought that DEI is a journey is not a new one. But yet, the number one thing I'm consistently asked is how do we get to quick wins in DEI? And we want to see action now. And so this question itself tells me we're missing the larger point of DEI as a journey. And the most common attempt I see at this quick fix is training. And training is a part of a strong strategic workplace diversity management program. In fact, research over the past 40 years tells us a lot about what training can do and what it can't do under certain circumstances. I rely on key takeaways from a meta-analysis by Bezrakova and colleagues that studied more than 216 independent training samples. Additionally, I know my colleagues and others, such as Quinetta, have ongoing research on this topic. And so one area that I've noticed research and practice don't seem to communicate that much about is kind of on the outcomes of training and whether or not it actually works. And so I've had the pleasure of leading corporate trainings at all levels. And my HR and learning and development clients are often shocked at some of the best practices that I share. And unlike many elements of DEI strategy, training, I think, is the most popular because I believe it's one of those few tangible things that we can wrap our minds around in this difficult work of doing these big things such as dismantling systematic inequalities. But again, I have seen this constant push and pull between research and practice and knowing that we don't always consider what we know from a research perspective. So I just want to share kind of three main observations. One main observation is that research tells us that purpose of a training being clear at the outset is critical to its success, and the most effective trainings target both awareness and skills development. However, many people bring in trainers for workshops that are designed for awareness building, but the organization assumes that it will lead to actually behavior change. And so for me, I ask my clients three questions when designing training to make sure that we're getting at the true purpose of the training. So what do you want people to know and think about as a result of the training? What is the experience you want people to have during the training? What do you want them to actually feel? And what do you want them to do as a result of the training? What type of behavioral change do you want to see? The second observation I have is that when organizations embark on a new DEI strategy, training is the first line of defense. It's the first thing that they want to do. While I'm always happy to conduct trainings, I do get a bit frustrated when I ask them what their plans are for after the training or how does training fit into their larger DEI efforts. And so research is really clear that training is most effective when it is complementary to other diversity initiatives and is part of overall strategy as well as conducted over time instead of in one-time efforts. So if we're serious about the purpose of trainings leading to behavioral change, it can't exist in a silo and it must be strategically integrated into the larger culture of the organization's efforts. My third observation is around performative wokeness versus having opportunities to fail and learn during the training. And so many times L&D teams develop trainings based on a topic of interest, and it might be based off of a current event such as Black Lives Matter, as we've seen this year. But when they get in the training, I often see leaders trying to convince me how woke they are and how far they have come along their own individual journeys. In fact, in many trainings, I ask a poll, how comfortable are you with workplace discrimination conversations such as gender, race, sexual orientation, age, etc. Almost always the leaders rate themselves at a 4 or a 5 and explain how great they are in these conversations. But later on in the training, when I have them do scenarios where they actually have to manage these types of conversations, they often pull back and they fail to be able to do that. And so, in closing, in the interest of time, there are major takeaways we know from a research perspective in terms of what makes DEI training effective versus what doesn't make it effective. But until we start applying those best practices, we'll continue to see organizations kind of struggle with creating trainings that actually lead to behavioral changes.